We wanted to offer our support during this time in a meaningful way. And we're hoping what we are going to present this morning provides a little light at the end of the tunnel. I'm going to just say a few words about our organization, and then we're going to move on to the presentation. SRS Strategic Associates is a consulting firm, and our mission is to assist providers who work with individuals with special needs to become and remain sustainable. By way of introduction about myself, I do know many of you. Some of you, I don't think we have met up to this point. In addition to having been the Chief Program Officer at Easter Seals, New Jersey for several years, I am a very seasoned grant writer and grants administrator. I wanted to just do a little housekeeping. Everyone, you will be on mute throughout the presentation. For today's webcast, we are using Microsoft Teams live events with the question and answer feature. To be able to send in your questions and make comments, look for and then select the QA icon on your screen. A QA icon panel will open. When you type in your questions or comments, please type your first and last name. My colleague, Linda Mayo, will be moderating throughout the session. And one personal note, I am in the midst of a family health crisis, which I'm sure many of you are also facing. So at some point, if I have to take a phone call from the doctor or hospital, Linda will be continuing the presentation. We will be posting all questions and answers at the end of the presentation, and we will email the slides. Please note that we are not going to discuss specific grants. I will be referring to a few during the presentation, but that's not the purpose of this presentation. If you want to talk about available grants, please contact us and we will do our best to assist you. This is also not Grant Writing 101. It's about how to get the yes answer you want. We use this concept that you are running a business and that you have to sell to your customer, who in this case are funders. We will address a number of selling points to get a funder to say yes. The selling points are all listed at the end of the presentation, as well as we are also going to bring up at the end of the presentation an opportunity for anyone who is looking for funding for residential programs, as we are managing a funding program for one of our clients. Selling point number one, everyone really wants to say yes. You just need to make it easy as possible for them to do so. That is what we're going to focus on here, the selling proposition. And I will be describing selling proposition a little bit later in the presentation. Here you can see that this is from 2017, that there are more than 34,000 501c3 organizations in New Jersey. And the New Jersey foundations give more than $3.4 billion each year. The source of that information is the independent sector. If you're interested in looking at information about who gives, how they give, and why, the independent sector is a very good organization. You can find them, you can Google them and look at their information. One of the highlights that I wanted to bring to your attention here is that most giving goes to religious organizations, then education. People mostly give to a cause they can identify with. Their religious affiliation, their alumni organization, or a disease like cancer that they know someone has experienced. But there's a surprise here in 2017, which is an uptick in the percentage of giving to human services. It's here listed at 12%. But when we look at this more carefully, we see that most people are still giving to religious and education organizations. That amounts to 45%. Most people in need are often served by organizations with most difficult route to financial stability. This makes the selling proposition even more important. We'll talk a little bit about types of grant funding. Project grants, capacity building grants, operating grants, research grants, and in-kind grants. As a general rule, we say don't depend on grants for operating support, but in a time of crisis that like we are in today, this is a possibility, even though it may not be long-term. As you will recall, if you were in this field during Superstorm Sandy or 9/11, there were a lot of operating grants that came out very quickly for organizations to apply for. Selling point number 2, selling to one funder can help you sell to the next one. So start with one that might be an easy sell. Funders, like people, want to be on a winning team. And I'm going to give you a little demonstration of that on the next slide. This is a real case scenario that happened to me many years ago as a grant writer. I had applied to a small bank and got an award for a driveway repair. In order to accept that award, I had to go to a meeting with the bank trustees. One of the bank trustees introduced me to their corporate giving event. I attended their corporate giving event and was able to secure a match money for a federal grant we were interested in. The federal grant award resulted in building relationships with nationwide subject experts. Recognized as a national expert, we were then offered partnerships on national projects. Selling point number 3, never underestimate the value of networking. To apply or not to apply, you have to choose very wisely. I need it now, except in crisis situations like we are in now, I need it now does not work. It takes a lot of time to be successful. You need to commit to this as part of your operations if you're going to do it all. So choose things that will build your long-term capacity whenever possible. Do I apply or not? This is an example of a grant that was just out a couple weeks ago from a New Jersey bank. It's no longer available. Well, they've given out all their money. But you're going to note that each grant was for $2,500. Now, it's possible that getting that $2,500 is worth it to put in all the effort that it takes to get a grant. That's something you really have to think about when there's small amounts like this. Maybe it's going to help you build a relationship with this bank, or maybe with other funders. Do the benefits outweigh the cost? This is a current grant that is out there. This is part of the CARES Act. This is the FCC telehealth, one of the telehealth grants that's out. And by the way, if you have any interest in this, we've been talking to people about this grant. We have a little bit of insight into it. We'd be happy to just talk to you about it in terms of your organization. So, give us a call or send us an email. So in this case, there's $200 million available. And each grant is going to be up to $1 million. So this is more complex. This is federal funding. The application itself doesn't look too difficult, but what the funder is going to require in terms of reporting looks like it might be. And one thing to note about this program that is different than many other grants you will get is it's a reimbursement program. You have to lay out the funds and purchase this equipment, and then they will reimburse you. So that's the question. Does the benefit outweigh the cost in this case? I believe this is your most valuable tool when seeking funding. Selling point number 4, the hook. It has to grab their attention, pique their interest, be authentic, and be communicated in a few sentences. This is not your elevator speech. We've all been taught about elevator speeches. This is not the same thing as that. This is about selling, not telling. Opportunities to sell. Selling point number 5. If it's a local funder with other potential areas of interest, you might apply for something you are eligible for and can use, but don't really think you will win. Think of this as relationship building. I just wanted to talk a minute about the in-person technical assistance and Q&A opportunities. I'm happy to see that these things still exist, obviously not right now, but that the state often has them and other funders do as well. And you might be saying to yourself, it's not mandatory that I go. Should I really spend my time? The answer is always yes. Even if you are unsure if you are interested in that particular funding, you should always go. You should go early and you should plan to stay late. One of the things I always recommend is that you also sign in as close to last as you can. It gives you an opportunity to see who else is there. Maybe you're looking at the sign-in sheet, you're seeing who your competition is. They also give you an opportunity to ask questions during the presentation. My personal recommendation is don't do it. What happens is you are telling the audience something about what your application is going to about. And unfortunately, I've seen many cases where people ask questions and other people in the audience are thinking, what in the world are they thinking? The reason to go early and stay late is make a goal for yourself that you will, well, now we're not shaking hands, I'll say elbow bump at least 1 or 2 people that are up in the front of the room giving the presentation, and that you will make sure that they have your business card. Timing can be everything. When and how to submit. This is probably common sense, but I'm going to say that I recommend that you always submit early. Even if they're not opening the applications to a certain date, it does tell the funder that you have a certain level of obligation, your commitment to the project. Selling point number 6, use capital campaign techniques such as informational interviews or asking for their involvement in environmental scans. What I mean by that is if you've ever been involved in a capital campaign, one of the first things you do is you go out and you speak to stakeholders, prominent people, people who understand the community, and you just ask them, what do you think about us building this building? Do you think there's a need for it? Do you think this is the right neighborhood? Do you think there will be support for it? And what that does, besides getting their input, which is always useful when you're applying for funding, it can get buy-in from those people. You can stay in touch with them. Maybe they are also a funder. It's a very good technique to use. This also goes for environmental scans. I'm going to mention that a little later in the application process, but you could also go out and speak to stakeholders, prominent people, and ask them about the environment. Do they think that this is a good community that would be interested in this? Has it been covered in the newspapers? What you're doing here is you're not making an ask. You're building a relationship. Okay. So this is often referred to as a value proposition. And I'm going to tell you that I think it's actually the selling proposition. These are really the same things. The goal of a selling proposition or a value proposition is conversion. Success is measured based on conversion rate. In case you aren't familiar with this concept of a conversion rate, here conversion means converting a prospect to a sale. So in our case, it's converting a prospective funder to saying yes. An example you might be familiar with in the healthcare world right now is when working with a population that is difficult to engage, it might mean converting a referral to a patient. Let's walk through these slides. Number one, embedding in a great business model. You're a fantastic organization, and now you are going to take this very worthwhile project and you are going to put it in what is already a terrific organization. 2, focus on what matters most to the customer. 2 and 3 are relatively the same. What is the need and what is the pain? Have there been other things tried that didn't work? And what are you going to do to solve that need? Number 4, this is written as if this was sales in a regular corporate work environment. It says target few jobs, pains, and gains, but extremely well. In other words, don't say you can do everything for everyone. Target the things that you are best at and that you know you can achieve. Go beyond function jobs and address emotions and social jobs. All right, so what we're really talking about here is, even though with federal grants, for instance, we tend to write in a more analytical, dry manner, it never hurts to put a little social, emotional content into it. Number 6, align with how customers measure success. Anyone that is sending out grants is going to tell you what they're looking for the outcomes to be. Many times now, they also tell you how they want you to measure success. You want to build your project, your response to them around that. That always should be forefront in your mind. Focus on job pains and gains that people will pay a lot of money for. Well, I think in the corporate world, the business world, you might be able to say, listen, I can do this for you, even though my price is higher, because I'm going to do a better job. I'm not sure how much opportunity there is for that in our world, but if it's a sophisticated funder, there is some possibility there. Differentiate from the competition. You're going to see one of my future points is going to be that you are in a competition. You are a competitor. You have to explain how you stand out. Outperform, outcompete. That's along the same lines as you must outperform your competitor. And when possible, talk about, number 10 says it is difficult to copy. Talk about your uniqueness. Selling point number 6. This is a competition and you are a competitor. You will win because you understand what matters most to the customer, in this case, the funder. You can resolve the need. Your model is the most cost-effective and efficient. You are better than the competition because, and you would explain that, you will outperform everyone else. Now I'm going to say, some of you know me pretty well and I can be pretty blunt, so I'm just going to say something here to everyone. If you're considering applying for a significantly competitive grant, so let's say it's a large foundation or a federal competition, and you don't believe and you cannot demonstrate everything on this slide, you probably should not put the effort into applying. Let's do it right and make it hard to say no. This information on this slide is based on my experience as many years as a grant writer and many years as a grant reviewer. I recommend that the first thing you do is outline the entire request for proposals. Don't outline one section, fill it in, outline the next section, fill it in. You've got to have in your brain the full scope of what is being expected of you. You need to quickly become an expert. You can write about a subject by doing a lot of research and looking at who the experts are, reading what they have to say, look at the past history, maybe of where this funder has given money. You want to come across in your proposal as an expert in this area. Add in everything, including the kitchen sink. When you first start writing, just put in everything you can find on the subject. Make sure you keep note of where you found the resources that you found. You're going to cull and sort that out later. We spoke a little bit earlier, conduct an environmental scan. Don't just give them data of how many people and have something and how many need service. Try to give them information so that they can have a visual picture in their mind of what the environment is like where these services are needed. So be careful with the sources you use. I'm just going to give you a personal example here. Many, many years ago, I submitted a very large federal grant, and later on was rereading it, part of it, and happened to see that I had used a source that was not appropriate. Not only was it a different political party, it was a group that was not recognized well. I don't even want to get into the details with it, but we did get the grant. But it always stayed in my mind that I liked what that source had to say, but I really I didn't know enough about the source before I used them. So what are they really asking? Now, these funders get many, many, many applications. We talked about how to distinguish yourself. Well, let's talk about the main areas. One is, does eligibility count? I'm going to say 100% yes. Don't apply for something that you really aren't eligible for just because you think you could do a good job and you should be eligible. The first thing a grant reviewer, is they look at the eligibility requirement, they look at what you've said, and if it doesn't match, you're now in the wastebasket. What is the funder's intent? So what are they really trying to get from you? What is it that they really want to accomplish? You've got to keep this front of mind. They are actually telling you what to say. If you look at an RFP carefully enough, you're going to see that they're actually telling you exactly what they want you to say. It's up to you to say it. I always picture them in the room when I'm writing. What do they want to know? They're sitting across from me as I'm writing this, and they're saying, well, I don't understand that. Why did you say that? What does that mean? I don't think you answered my question. It's a good technique to use. Does it have to be a real relationship? So many times you're in a situation, especially today, where you're applying electronically, you don't know these people, you have no way to get to know these people. You and 1,000 other people are applying. So what you've got to do is sort of pretend to yourself that you do have a relationship with them. And you want to write this in a voice that it sounds like you understand them, you use their language, and you do have a relationship with them. One thing you never want to do is make them bored. You have to be careful that you say what you need to say and not more than that. And always have someone read it before you submit. Okay, I'm sorry for flipping around. I'm missing a slide. Okay, I think we missed the slide somewhere. So I'm going to just talk about one that doesn't appear to be here. I'll tell you what, no, we're going to move forward. I apologize for that. I'm sorry. Okay, the reason this slide is in here, it's not so specifically related to what we're talking about, but I wanted to make you all aware of this. The World Health Organization and other international and national organizations have said that in emergency crisis situations like we are here in right now, and where a funder wants a detailed evaluation as part of your reporting or part of what you are submitting in an application, you can use this model called real-time evaluation. You're going to want to read up on this a little bit if you're submitting something that is asking you for an evaluation. And we're sending out these slides so you'll have all these steps. I'm not going to go through this, but I wanted to make sure you had this as a resource. So maybe you're thinking to yourself that you don't have the right staff, you don't have the bandwidth, blah, blah, to to submit grants, and you're thinking you're going to reach out to a consultant. And having been a consultant for many years and having used consultants, I wanted to point out some of the things that I think are the do's and don'ts around using a consultant. First of all, they should be paid a predetermined fee based on the scope of work, and that should be agreed upon in writing before they start the project. They should not be paid based on a percentage of the award. This is considered unethical in the grant writing profession. So in other words, if they come to you, this is my opinion on this. If a grant writer comes to you and says, you know what, don't pay me now. When you get the grant, give me 10%. First of all, funders do not want to pay for that way. And I consider it to be an unethical practice. Ask about their track record. I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? When you're interviewing someone, you want to find out what they've written before, how successful they've been, get a general sense that they understand you and your organization, that you can communicate well with them. You can ask them what the odds of success are. This is a very difficult thing to predict, but you sure don't want somebody that says, I'm sure you're going to get this, and you wouldn't take someone who says you absolutely have no chance. So sometimes maybe someone like me can give you sort of odds of success based on data that's out there or based on, historical knowledge, but I would ask that question. You also want the person to tell you that they won't be writing the same proposal for other organizations at the same time. One of the complicating factors with this is that federal FCC funding that we talked about earlier, because that funding, the application portal is actually open as of Monday. They have $200 million to spend, and the applications are rolling, which means first comes, first serve. So in that case, it might be possible that your consultant is writing one for you and maybe later going to write one for someone else. But the general rule is you do not want someone to write the same proposal for you as someone else. Also, ensure that your business intellectual property is protected. You don't want them using your information when they're working for another client. And do you want confidentiality? Are you okay with them telling other providers, other companies that they did work for you and what the work was and whether it was successful or not? Do they have to know the subject? I do not believe that the person has to know the exact specific subject of what they're writing about. If they are good enough at persuasive writing, good enough at researching a topic, and have a good enough communication with you, I don't think they really have to know. I would want them to know the general area like human services, but they might not really have to know the specific subject. And I think you should ask for references. So we're coming to the end here. And this is the list of all the selling points that we discussed. And I mentioned early on that we are representing an organization, a company that is responsible for distributing some residential funding. And we're happy to provide you with more information about this. These are the basic information here. This funding is to build, to purchase or build or renovate housing in Edison Township in New Jersey. And the funds have to be used for people with special needs. They have to be adults. It's one adult per bedroom. And this is part of their fair share housing commitment. They have 125 plus units available, so over $3 million in funding. And each bedroom, each unit they will award $25,000. So if you do, say, a group home with 4 bedrooms, $100,000. You can also get funding for a generator for the home and emergency repairs on an more ongoing basis. SRS Strategic Associates is responsible for identifying developers, owners, providers that are interested in this. We have a toolkit with resources on funding through Edison Township. We will walk you through the entire application process, as well as information on other funding that you can use to match up with this to complete your project. And we also have a resource desk where organizations that are interested can contact us. That's the phone number here. And we will help you with any questions you have around this project. So we're at a point now where we're going to talk about any questions, comments, or answers that anyone has posted. And I also just wanted to bring to your attention the other two webinars that we will be holding that were in the same notice as this one. And we'd appreciate if you let anybody know that that you attended this one, that these other webinars are going to be available. And thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. Okay, we're going to open up.
Shelley, that was great. Thank you so much. And I got a couple questions for you that came in through the email.
Okay.
So the first question is this. The question is, where are the best places to look for crises recovery funding?
Well, there are, I don't know if you're seeing things just coming at you. I sure am. I'm seeing them in the trade association newsletters. I'm seeing them through lists that I have signed up with the state, all the different state departments. I also have a source of private and foundation funding. It's a subscription that we pay for. And so we're getting them that way. And if you know of a funder that you maybe have worked with before or have heard about before, I would absolutely look at their websites. I would look at all the bank websites. I would look at the large corporate websites. And, you know, there is the foundation library. There is a branch, the biggest branch in New Jersey happens to be in Trenton at the State Library, which is now not open. But you can access some of their resources for free. There are also, and I'm not plugging this publication, but there are publications such as Grants Watch. You can get some basic information for free. And otherwise you have to subscribe. We happen to have a subscription to that. And I'll tell you that if you have some specific area that you're very particularly interested in, we're willing to, you know, assist you a little bit, you know, in identifying some potential sources. You could also read the Federal Register. That's quite a thing to put on yourself. That comes out every day and has all the funding listed. But what I really recommend is you make a list for yourself of all the major places where you know that funding comes out of, and look to see what they have offered. And really, the trade associations have excellent resources on all of that. I hope that's helpful. Again, you can contact us for any more details on that.
Thanks, Shelley. I have another question here. I would imagine this is specific to these recovery grants and funding that are now available. The question is, how do I differentiate my organization from others in the same situation?
So let me just give, you know, it's different in every situation, and I don't mean to skirt the issue. So let me just give you a response in relation to that new FCC telehealth grant that's out, because I've had 4 conversations in the last 2 days with New Jersey providers about that. And so one of the first things I say to them is, in this particular case, they are looking for applicants who are in the highest hit areas, right? Okay, New Jersey checks off on that list. And 2 of these providers happen to be in the counties with the highest number of COVID cases. Checks off that list. And one of the 4 also can use the technology to communicate and do therapy or medical services with individuals who reside in their residences. So what they have is they have the service delivery and they have sort of a captive audience of the service recipient. So what you really want to do is you want to look at the application and you want to be able to check off as many boxes as possible. I personally am not, this is my opinion, I'm not sure that applicants that want to purchase this equipment and use it, but do the service delivery, let's say it's primary care, but their patients are, let's say, unfortunately, a homeless population, I'm not so sure that they are going to check off as many boxes as possible. So what you want to do to distinguish yourself is you want to think about every possibility of what this funder is looking at and check off as many boxes as you can and explain that to them that you do. You don't need to be saying, well, Joe Schmo down the street doesn't have this, but we do. You just need to put your best foot forward and talk about what you can do that meets all the requirements.
Great. And I have one last question here, unless someone else comes in with another. But the question to you, Shelley, is, can you provide any guidance on what to do if I receive a no from a funder? Are there actions to take?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you that what I always say when I got a no is, okay, now I have an opportunity, to make this into a yes, right? Because that no is coming from somebody. Most cases, whoever is giving you that no is somebody that you could contact in some way or another. And what you want to do is you want to be upfront and say, look, I have no expectation that you're going to change your opinion on this. I'm purely reaching out to you to understand, to get to know you and understand what I might do in the future, what I might do better. Now, with state grants and a lot of government grants, you can, after you get the no, go to Trenton and look and see what happened with your application. And sometimes when you go there, you might be able to speak to somebody. And if not, at least you're actually usually getting to see who else applied. And you're getting to see what it was that was not, in your application that maybe you didn't get enough points in a certain area. But let me say something to you that if you're after a certain funding by a certain funder, try your best to get to know them outside of the grant period. Because usually once the RFP comes out, this is for private or public funding, those people are not interested and not really allowed to speak to you. So if you're interested in a particular area, try to get to know people beforehand. If you get the no, wait a little while and try to connect with them afterwards. You might even want to talk to whoever did get the grant. You never know, there might be a partnership there. There might be some insight that they're willing to give you. Anything else?
Shelley, that's all I have right now. I had given a last call in our Q&A panel here, and it seems like you did a great job answering the questions and giving us a great overview of how to get funders to say yes today. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for attending. We very much appreciate it. We hope that this has been helpful to you and hope you'll join us in our other webinars.